Hello, Guru Nation. So, a few days ago, I did a video on creating source for site owners, and it's just a macro overview. It wasn't detailed enough. I was trying to keep it simple. Like basically the concept of that was, yes, you might be research naive, and guess what? Whenever anyone gets a new study, they are naive to that study too. No matter if you've been doing research for 0 years or 100 years, it's a new study. You got to learn it. There's no substitute for learning the protocol, all that stuff. So research naive or not research naive, you need to learn your protocols. That was
So
the macro overview.
so know your protocol. That's
Know your
that's the point.
protocol.
Yeah.
Know your protocol because 85% of the time you have to create your own source. Sponsor's not going to do it for you.
Oh, more than that.
Nah, I would say it's 85.
85?
It's anecdotal. Here we've had 6 studies and 2 of them have provided source
Really?
so far.
Oh,
Yep.
so you get a third. So you're at like 66%.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's a little high too. Like from my overall experience is about 85.
Okay.
But regardless, the majority is it's not going to be made for you. So you got to learn the protocol. You got to utilize your CRA. At the SIV is the time to hash out, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Monitor, is my source okay? What would you change? Is there a certain order the sponsor prefers? So I covered those elements in that video, but we didn't go into great detail. Chris brought it up that we need to actually go further in depth on this. So this is for anyone who owns a site or is thinking of owning a site, or anyone who's thinking of becoming a CRA or a CRC, because we're going to give you a little snippet of our CRA Academy and show you the EDC system we use, which is the Bioclinica system. So we'll share the screen and discuss what you should be putting in your source. And Chris, this was a great topic idea. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. But before we move on, you mentioned something about sponsors preparing source. And, I only worked with source prepared by the sponsor once as a coordinator, and they made a lot of errors in the source. It was, I'm not going to mention the company name, but
Yeah, that would be
a
foolish.
very large company, one of the largest companies, pharma companies in the world, had prepared the source, and um, one of the funny items, it was an important data point in the source, and it was 2 months before anybody caught that this data point wasn't being captured in the source. It was 2 months. It was a huge ordeal in the study, but anyhow, um,
And that's why they don't do it because
yeah,
they want that liability on you, not on them.
and if they create the source, and sites just don't review the source if the sponsor's handing it to them, generally speaking, and I recommend you should because they do make errors. um, but again, most sites don't, so what winds up happening is all the sites are making the same error, right? They're all
Yeah.
missing the same data points, because or making the same errors depending on what the problem with the source is. And
So it's just spreading out their risk by having the sites do it themselves. And
yeah,
you can argue that forces the sites to learn the protocol.
and the sites will all be what errors they do make, because generally speaking, there's going to be some errors initially in the source. They're all different amongst the sites, so they're
Yeah.
not running into this problem of the same data points going to be a problem, right? Because all
Yeah.
the sites are
Yeah.
making errors on it. So
So, okay, let's say we get a new study. We don't have source.
mhm.
Where do we start?
Well, got to read the protocol, uh, and the schedule of assessments are very important to creating your source. Um, Now, if you're a client of ours, you can ask us to create it for you. But here again, just like with the sponsor, you can expect there'll be errors. You should always review whatever source is being created. Whether it's at your site, there should be two sets of eyes on it, whoever creates it, and then another set to review it. Or if you're getting it from us, or if you're getting it from the sponsor, whatever the case may be, it needs to be created and reviewed. So again, let's just take the hypothetical, you're a client. person viewing this video, and you've received source from us. What I would recommend, again, this is hypothetical. What you want to do is go through every data point that's captured in EDC and review it against the source and make sure what you see in your source matches what's happening in EDC. What I mean by that, again, I understand you're all research naive. I guess the best way to do this would be through the vitals.
Yeah, but just another overview. So when you create source, it sounds so generic. What you're really doing is creating a source document for every study visit.
Yes.
You're not just doing it all at once, and there's no separation between the visits. You're creating visit 1, visit 2, visit 3, and so on.
So if you see up here, we're in an EDC system, and up here it shows that we're site 400, patient 101, and this is their screening visit. So all of these items over here in the left-hand column are what's captured at the screening visit. So you got to make sure on your source, again, if you're preparing source for this particular study that we're showing you here, you would have to make sure all of these things are captured in your source documents for the screening visit. But to get down into particulars, something the protocol doesn't often tell you is measurements, right? So is height captured in meters or in inches? So is it metric or is it standard, right? Same thing with weight, right? Is it in kilos or is it in pounds? So you have to go through the source and EDC to figure these things out. And you want
And
to
what
make
if you don't have EDC access yet?
Well, oftentimes the sponsors will provide you with EDC guidelines in which these things are mentioned within those guidelines.
Because we ran into this issue with the guy. We have a guy who creates our source at the site, and we had a new study. We already had EDC access, but he couldn't see anything in the EDC without us enrolling a patient. It wouldn't
that's
show
interesting.
the data points.
That's interesting. So yeah, you'd have to go through the guidelines. And sometimes what the sponsor provides to you in terms of guidelines, EDC guidelines, it's really kind of confusing. Even if you're a veteran in research, it's a little bit confusing. So
So would the option be EDC guidelines or EDC screenshots that you request from your monitor?
yeah, that could work. That could work. And as you said initially, I mean, you could always ask your CRA to review your source.
It's technically part of their job.
Yeah, the problem is they're oftentimes so busy that either they're not going to do it or they're going to do a poor job.
Yeah, they would just tell you refer to the study operations manual or refer to the protocol.
Yeah. So
what I found best with the CRA thing is at SIV, oftentimes they're just sitting there waiting for a PI to show up, and you're just kind of wasting time anyways. Show them what you have made already and say, like, at least for visit 1 and 2, because that's like 90% of that might be 100% of what you need as far as creating the sources done at screening and baseline. So ask them if it looks good and if the order of assessments are correct and if the units being collected are correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would definitely be beneficial. But I'm curious, getting back to the EDC and having a patient enrolled in order to see what's required. Do you recall the system that was? Because I don't.
Yeah, the big one, metadata.
Really? It was metadata? Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Because I don't recall ever seeing that before.
Yeah, log in if you have access to one. Don't do it live. But if you have access to one that you haven't screened anyone yet, try to do it.
There's nothing there, huh?
Yeah. Unless we couldn't figure it out. I mean, it would only show you if you enrolled someone.
Okay.
Like what data you need.
Interesting. Well, I mean, there's a workaround to that as well. I don't necessarily recommend this. You can put a patient you can enroll somebody in IVRS that's not an actual person, but then you're gonna have to go through the steps of getting them removed. Um,
Yeah, they can accuse you of fraud.
well, not if you immediately go through it. I guess if you really want to be safe, you could ask your CRA. I want to enroll somebody so I can see the EDC.
Yeah, I would not do that because what happens like 5 years later, someone audits and nobody knows, nobody remembers what happened.
Well, that's where I'm saying you'd have to go through the steps on getting them removed after
Yeah,
you have
but there's
access to
still an
everything.
audit. There's still an audit trail.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you remove it from your end, you can't see it, but the sponsor can still see, and an
sure.
auditor can still see what happened here.
Well, this is why I'm saying, well, this is why I said I'm not recommending this.
Yeah, definitely don't do that.
Anyhow, so yeah, if you have access to EDC and you can see everything, because Dan's bringing up a point I hadn't considered, you want to make sure that every data point that's being gathered, vital signs, height, weight, BMI, all of these things, um, I'm bringing up demographics, all the different individual things within uh, that particular item. So demographics, then we see here what exactly they want gathered for demographics. You got to make sure this is all reflected in your paper source documents or your electronic source documents.
Right.
And also whatever system they're utilizing in terms of capturing weight or height, you can look there and see as well what system is being used, whether it be metric or standard. So um, if you have access to EDC and the EDC shows you, I think this is a good way to make sure everything that you need to capture in your source is reflected in your source, right? You just compare everything in your source to the visits here. Um, and as Dan said, if the EDC isn't available, then you'll have to go through the guidelines. You're going to have to find another avenue, which is your CRA.
Right.
So, moving away from our clients to our students, this is also the system, or to any potential students, this is the system that you'll use.
Yeah, you're
Um,
looking at the CRA Academy right now. This
yep.
is the EDC for weeks 9 through 11
I believe
that
this
you'll
is,
be working on.
I believe this is specifically the week 9,
Hmm.
the first patient, that you'll work on in EDC at week 9. Um, and what you do is you go through and you verify that the information captured in EDC matches what's in source. Um, that's source data verifying. And then there's some review as well that you need to do.
And by the way, if you or someone watching and you can develop this skill of creating source for sites, you've got a definite business on your hands because we know with our clients, sites need this, and every site needs this.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you just provide them like a framework for, like Chris said, like if you give me, I'm the site owner, you give me like a rough sketch of what a source would be for visit 1, 2, 3, 4, I can go in there and refine it later. It's a lot easier than creating it from scratch. And that's essentially what we do for our clients.
Yep. Yep. And something I forgot to mention in vital signs, the EDC usually does not give you the option to select which measurement system
Right.
it's already just there, right? So
Yeah.
this is a little different because we're programming this.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I have seen them like this, but yeah, BioClinic is not used that often anymore as a EDC platform.
yep,
Still
we
is, but it's not that common.
I think we used it once that I recall on an actual study
Yeah.
by a sponsor.
Yeah, I currently have 6 or 7 studies, and none of them are BioClinic though.
Yeah, it's almost exclusively metadata now.
Yeah. Metadata, there's IBM.
Inform still
IBM's
used.
getting big and Inform.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
anything else? Any more pointers?
no, I mean, again, so you threw me a curveball with that EDC not having access to it. So that's a
Yeah, we just experienced it a few weeks ago.
that's definitely a problem.
Yeah. And a former CRC Academy grad, one of our best students we've had, is the guy doing this for my site.
Okay.
And I know he pays attention to details and he couldn't find a way to do it. without, like you said, creating a patient, which I told him definitely not.
Well, that leaves you with the guidelines. Um,
Hmm. Or screenshots. You can ask for screenshots,
yeah, that too.
which we
So,
did. We asked for both of those, but we had our SIV coming up, and I wanted the source ready pre SIV, and no one replied to us fast enough to get those for us. So
mhm.
he just made it based on the schedule of assessments, and I'm actually still refining them right now. We haven't screened anyone yet.
So yeah, if you want to make sure your source is right, you're definitely going to have something from the EDC, whether it be guidelines or access, or
Hmm.
pictures, images of the different visits. Um,
Yep.
Unfortunately, I guess it's not always simple. That's the way it
No,
works in research.
that's the way research is. Not everything's simple, and you know what? You're going to learn the protocol better by doing it. And yes, you can outsource certain things, but at the end of the day, it's your responsibility, whether you're a coordinator, site owner, site director, to know the protocol and to know the study well enough to where you believe you have adequate source to capture the data. That
Yeah,
is what we're doing at the end of the day, anyways, is collecting data.
yeah, that's pretty much all we're doing.
Yep,
Getting getting patients and gathering associated data. Bless you.
absolutely. So thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions about becoming a client, let us know underneath this video. This is my contact info. And if you're interested in joining CRA CRC Academy, where you get exposed to some of these tools, same thing. Thank you, Chris. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.
Thank you, Dan.